Hello and welcome to another FPL Advice video. Today, I'm joined by CNBC space reporter and FPL veteran who organizes a fiercely competitive league among our college friends, an Everton supporter, and one of the people who actually helped me join FPL 3 years ago. Michael Sheetz, how you doing today?
Great. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for joining. I'm stoked to have you on here as my first special guest on the FPL Advice channel. You've been a great part of this channel, giving me tips and advice on ways I can improve, so thank you. But let's get to it. Michael, tell me, how's your team doing so far with 3 games into the season?
To be honest, it feels pretty good. And unlike last year, I'm not kind of panicking only 3 weeks in. I've had to make some tweaks, but I mean, who hasn't already at this point?
No, exactly. Let's take a look at your team. So you currently have 225 points so far. Since game week 1, really, you've gone with the City triple up. Didn't work out well in game week 1 as they lost to Tottenham, but it sure did in game week 2 and 3. And you've also gone without Trent all season long so far. Are you happy with the decision?
Yeah, I would say I'm pretty happy with it overall. Diaz and Cancelo both have survived the Pep roulette, and they've been playing 90 minutes in all 3 games. And honestly, losing that clean sheet to Son's excellent goal the first week, who can complain? I mean, that was an amazing performance and one that might not happen again given the defenders on the field. I will point out Mahrez on my team. He's been a funny one. I mean, he had a frustrating game week 1 performance when he started, and then he had 2 sub appearances where he had actually returns. I was really hoping he would start against Norwich or Arsenal. And 4 points per game really isn't going to cut it for a £9 million midfielder. So I am expecting to transfer him out in game week 5 after playing Leicester and Southampton. Those look like great fixtures where even if he subs in, he could get more returns. Trent is an interesting one. I actually had him in most of my drafts until Tsimikas became an option for those really good early Liverpool fixtures. And I realized when I was, debating, do I keep him? Do I jump to Tsimikas? That I could double up on City, get Shaw, and then also still have an attacking Liverpool fullback starting in my lineup. And so that's really the basis behind when I went with Trent. He's an incredible option. He's, proven through FPL season after season. The one that's been really frustrating has been Shaw. He has looked so much better on the field when you watch him play than his FPL results have been showing. And in all of this, kind of thinking about where I am so far, I do want to share a little bit of my philosophy around building my team and making transfers is that I actually, a lot of people talk about form versus fixtures. I actually kind of put it in an order of class, form, and then fixtures. And by class, I mean just really quality of the player. You watch them, you see that they really are delivering, even if they're not like a premium like Bruno, they're high quality, they get their starts, they take their chances. I'm talking about folks like Antonio and DCL and Shaw, those guys who are really, really solid and can hold things down for you.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. I love that philosophy. I mean, and I have to say, I kind of have a similar look on it. But I do always like to have one kind of risky pick or 2. This year was Benrahma, which kind of worked out. And then the second one was Tony, which he lost value already, only got a goal in 3 games. So that's been that. But other than that, I definitely look at the same thing. It's just kind of the quality of a player and then the form fixtures. So do you think you're going to bring Trent into your team in the near future?
I can't say. I mean, I think something would have to change pretty dramatically with an injury on another team for me to do that. I am tempted to maybe when I wildcard fit him in with instead of Cancelo and Diaz. I'm not sure. I mean, Diaz is such a rock in that City back line. And the way Chelsea's been playing, like some of their options defensively are looking pretty good. Like even Rudiger, he's only 5.5, but TAA is hard to really vote against. So he's one I'm like my fingers on the trigger, kind of itching on whether or not to pull it. So we'll see.
All right, very cool, very cool. So Michael, you got 74 points in game week 3. Heck of a week where the average was only 54 points. Did everything in game week 3 go as planned for you, or was there something that completely threw you off?
So captaining Antonio was probably the best decision I've made so far this season, in terms of especially someone that I wasn't even expecting to be in my team. But his explosive start made him my first unplanned transfer of the season. I swapped Ings for Antonio and then captained him instead of Bruno. And I mean, you and I share the pain last week of that painful 1 point captaincy for Bruno. And I just, that bitter taste in my mouth, and the way Man U struggled against Southampton didn't make me feel really great about Wolves. And the way Antonio was playing, it really paid off huge. I mean, delivering 22 points. And then on the flip side, Bruno blanking. I mean, I wasn't going to really mind if Bruno got a goal or an assist because he's still on my team. But it was a much better week than I kind of was fearing, because when that deadline passed, I was like, oh, God, I do not know if Antonio was the right idea.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I'm very much regretting not captaining Antonio. I went with Bruno again. Game week 2, he got me 2 points. Game week 3, he got me 4 points. So I'm very disappointed in that selection, but that's all right. You know, it's only 2 game weeks. It's going to happen again. So heading into game week 4, Michael, do you have any ideas for your transfers? And are you planning your transfers with a wild card in mind? The reason I asked this is I've received a lot of DMs yesterday and today from people on Instagram and Twitter already asking for their wildcard teams and then asking for advice, since they've already hit that activate button. So, yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Look, I mean, if you're wildcarding at this point, there is at least enough data for you to understand that, you know, Lukaku could be a really good alternative premium. He's still got, you know, much lower ownership than some of the other premiums. And after the next few weeks, Chelsea's fixtures start to turn around. And you really can understand maybe a little bit more of what's happening in terms of transfers with, you know, Bruno perhaps getting less points when Ronaldo comes in. And this is something I'm sure we'll talk about more in depth. But my current plan that I'm sticking to is I'm saving that wild card for at least game week 7 because of a little bit of the scheduling. And for now, in game week 4, I'm just going to be swapping Tsimikas out. You know, he got me that 0.1 profit. I'm locking it in. I'm going to grab like another $4 million defender, who at least someone who's starting now, just so I don't lose that value there. And I really want to see how Ronaldo starts off before I pull the trigger on Ronaldo, which is a big reason behind me waiting till game week 7. The other reason is what I like to call this alternative FDR schedule. You know, a lot of us are familiar with the fixture difficulties rankings that, you know, Fantasy FPL has for you. I created this alternative schedule table that actually just tracks runs, and in terms of your kind of strength of schedule, and looking at different teams in terms of at least 3 games in a row, and you know, transferring in a player to get that, you know, 3 game week run or more, where they're going to be really solid. And maybe there's some folks in here, some teams in here that won't be as good of a target, but overall that week will give you a lot of strength.
Yeah, no, I think this alternative FDR schedule that you've created is awesome, and I know I will definitely be using this, and I hope that, you know, people watching will be using this. It's definitely such a great tool to kind of visually see the good games that teams have, and that kind of can help you make the transfers for upcoming game weeks, not just the 3 games that that the FPL app really shows you. So this is really cool. Thank you for sharing this, Michael.
Yeah, you appreciate it.
Yeah, so you mentioned seeing how Ronaldo starts off. Assuming he is priced at 11.5 to 12.5 million, since we don't really know yet, is he someone you'd consider bringing in right away? And do you also think that Ronaldo coming into the Man U team hurts Fernandez's value, as we don't really know who's going to be on penalties?
So the popular opinion that I've read is that Bruno's points are going to be hurt by Ronaldo joining. Yeah. The assumption is Ronaldo is going to come in just like on the Portuguese national team, and he's going to take the pens from Bruno. I'm not sure even Ronaldo being on pens over Bruno is a good enough reason to drop Bruno. This Man U team, even though they might have struggled a little bit scoring in the last 2 weeks, Bruno behind a front line of Ronaldo, Greenwood, Sancho, 3 of the players that are all firing, who are proven. I mean, Sancho needs to pick up the pace a little bit here. Yeah. He's maybe not someone I'm going to pick for FPL, but talking about Bruno being able to assist all of these guys in front of him and then score the occasional goal. I mean, we were watching him against Wolves still make those deep runs, even when Cavani was on the field, who's kind of that similar central forward that Ronaldo is going to play. That I'm not so certain that taking out Bruno is the play. I'm actually even considering swapping Salah for Jota to afford both Ronaldo and Bruno when I wildcard, because Jota has really been proving himself in that Liverpool team, and I think there's actually a pretty decent shout that he gets pretty close to Salah in points this year. And then also having Ronaldo and Bruno could, really open things up in terms of being a differential over the rest of the league. Obviously, I get, possibly left behind, and maybe there's a little anti-Liverpool bias in there. But I mean, I think it could be a really high quality play that's a bit risky, but has a really high ceiling.
A very interesting point. Yeah, no, and also Firmino got hurt in the last game, so Jota could be starting, especially if Klopp doesn't want to, rush Firmino back in. So he's also another player I've been looking at. But it's so interesting that you're thinking about bringing Bruno in, because the only thing I'm thinking right now is how do I get him off my team? And I think that it's purely because of the emotions that I captained him 2 games in a week and he blanked, right? It is not because Bruno is a bad player. It's not because he's overpriced, because he's not. He's the right value. He's at the price he should be at, and he's going to continue to get returns. But the fact that he blanked twice for me, I'm literally considering how do I get him out of my team. So that's interesting how we're thinking differently right now, right?
Yeah. No, so, it's certainly a big conundrum.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so as an Everton supporter, give us a take on Everton and Everton FPL assets. Their fixtures are great starting game week 4. Have Everton assets become essentials?
So I think that DCL is the only one of the Everton group that could really be considered an essential asset for FPL. Watching this team, he's the one that I think could actually, be the real continued central point, especially the way Benitez has had us set up. And I think the pieces that he's brought in, and the pieces that he brought in is another really interesting point. I mean, Demarai Gray at 5.5, 2 goals in 2 consecutive games against, not the easiest of opponents out there either. He's really shown that he can be a really explosive winger that can finish with quality. And maybe rekindle some of the success that people thought he would have when he was at Leicester in the years prior. I think DCL, because he's now on penalties, is really, really got a good shout for hitting 20 goals in the Premier League this season. I would say that Digne is a huge star for your defense. 5.5, he's a little pricey, and I really wouldn't add him until we see Ben Godfrey starting at center back again for Everton. We've been leaking goals due to some mistakes in the back line, and especially if we get in a really quality right back, I could see Digne's value going up quite a bit. Richarlison is an interesting one that people might consider because he's a little lower priced than DCL. But the biggest thing there is that he can be very, very streaky. And while he might be a differential, if you get lucky with him, he's not someone I'm going to recommend. The other mid that I would shout out at 5.5, who is scoring goals and is actually being allowed up much farther up the pitch this season under Rafa than under Carlo, is Decore. 5.5 midfielder, really, really solid, gets a lot of passes in, which can help him in terms of bonus points. And then also, I mean, he had an unbelievable finish in our first week against Southampton, really showed the quality that he is. So I think there's really some potential there.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for that input. Yeah, Gray is definitely someone I'm also really looking at right now due to the price point, and obviously plays for a really good team, and the fixtures line up very well. So the only thing with Gray, I'm a little scared because I don't know. He's someone new to Everton. I don't know if he's going to be starting every single game. He has so far, but I'm afraid that he might get rotated with the Iwobi.
Yeah, I will say that there is at least some risk there, and I think the bigger risk is not necessarily him not starting, because he adds pace to the team that we really, really desperately need alongside Richarlison. I would say that the risk is down the line that he starts getting subbed off pretty early and misses some of those late goal opportunities. He Benitez so far has placed a ton of trust in him and has just been singing his praises. So I think he's going to be a real kind of locked in starter for the long term.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I mean, he's great value at 5.5 million, so I'm sure he's going to be getting picked up by many FPL managers. So all right, Michael. So real quick, let's look at my game week 3 team. A little bit disappointing game week for me. 58 points only. My overall rank dropped from 20,000 to 60,000. And it's really all due to me captaining Fernandez and everyone else captaining Antonio. So another terrible captaincy pick for me. Any thoughts or advice for my team?
Well, I mean, it's maybe too early to say the Benrahma train has left the station, but he's one who maybe, especially if West Ham add like Lingard, which is one of the rumors out there, he might be one that you don't stick around. Ings, he's one thing I was looking at in the underlying statistics. He's really outperforming how much he's expected to score right now or assist, and Villa's fixtures for the next few weeks aren't very good for scoring many goals. And so I think maybe Ings or Benrahma, but the rest of your team is looking pretty solid. And I can't really say there's too many tweaks in there. I mean, there's such a really great lineup in that back line that I think is going to keep getting clean sheets.
Cool.
So I got to ask you then, coming into game week 4, what are your transfer plans? I mean, are you considering pulling the wild card trigger yet? And if not, do you have a target week in mind?
Yeah, no. So you actually took the words out of my mouth. Ings is definitely out of my team this week. I've kind of planned this. He's got, I believe it's Chelsea, Everton, Man U, and then Spurs next. So really tough fixtures. And he's a very easy transfer for a DCL or a Jimenez, as Everton and Wolves have really good fixtures coming up. So that's one option that I'm considering. I do have 2 free transfers. So another option that I'm looking at right now is dropping Ings to a 4.5 forward and then upgrading Brownhill to Torres or Diego Jota. That would kind of bring up another, good midfielder into my team. But obviously, Brownhill at least gets 90 minutes each game, where there's no 4.5 million forward who gets any playing time. So we'll see what happens there. As for my wild card, since I started the season, I've been planning all along to wild card in game week 7 to bring in those Chelsea assets that you mentioned earlier in the conversation. But honestly, looking at my team right now, I'm so happy with it that I don't actually think that a wild card in game week 7 is going to be completely necessary. I think I can have a good team, depending on the transfers I make. I think I can have a very good team, even in game week 7 with Chelsea assets. So we'll see what happens there. As of right now, the plan is to wild card in game week 7, but I do hope that I can save that wild card for maybe, game week 10 or 12, whenever I actually need it. You know what I mean? So we'll see what happens there.
Yeah, no, I think that's really spot on. And I mean, the risk is obviously maybe the fixtures shift a little bit, and you have some harder fixtures for that lineup. But you can't disagree with where you're ranking in the top 100K right now. And I mean, that's just a kind of a really, really amazing start to the season. And that shifts us pretty well then. I mean, if you're not looking to pull the wild card trigger right now, let's talk about those captaincy options for game week 4. I think there's an unbelievably number of I might even say juicy options. I mean, really, really good ones out there.
Yeah, it's a very tough question. And I think it's going to be split between so many different captains in game week 4. For me, I think it will definitely be between Fernandez, Salah, or Antonio. And the reason I say that is because those are probably going to be the 3 players that I have in my team. Even though Bruno has failed me over the past 2 game weeks, for some reason, I still want to just give him one last chance before I transfer him out, especially since they're playing at home against Newcastle. Newcastle has been one of the worst defensive teams in the league this year. So I think that's a very good game for them. And I want to give him one more shot before I say goodbye. Liverpool play Leeds, so obviously Mo Salah is an incredible option there. I also think that Leeds are a team that are not going to sit back for 90 minutes and defend, which will open up a lot of space for Salah to kind of work his magic there. So I think he's a phenomenal option. Antonio's 2.91 expected goals speak for himself. He's absolutely on fire right now, and will continue to score goals. And they're also playing Southampton, so that's a really good fixture for them. I don't have DCL, but I'm thinking about, again, transferring Ings out for him. So I think, he's got a expected goals of 3.31. That's the highest of any forward I've seen so far. So he's a great captaincy pick against Burnley at home. Although Burnley are a good defensive team, I also think they're not going to just sit back and defend. I think they're going to try to, score against Everton. And then the two other options I think are great for captaincy picks are the Tottenham duo, Kane and Son. The reason I'm not considering them, I don't think I'm going to have them in game week 4, but I do think that both of them are phenomenal captaincy picks. So what about you? Have you made up your mind on who you're going to captain, or still 11 days away? But
Well, so after the success with Antonio, I feel almost obligated to pick him against Southampton. But my current pick is also Bruno against Newcastle. I mean, at home against a team that's just leaking goals, I mean, it looks way too good to pass up. Salah is really tempting for exactly the reason that you mentioned. I mean, Leeds have been one of the worst teams so far this year and alongside Newcastle defensively. And he's just been delivering. I mean, a point average of 10 points a game, like that, you can't really go wrong there. Similarly for you, I don't have DCL, don't have Kane, don't have Son, but I would say if you had one of those latter three, I would shout out Son against Crystal Palace. Son has been on fire. Son looks really, really good. And even if Kane is not delivering, he's probably going to be assisting Son. So.
No, I think you're spot on. Exactly. I think there's too many picks. There's really too many picks for game week 4.
So you and I have something in common. We don't have any FPL assets from the teams that we support. What made you shy away from Chelsea players to start the year?
Yeah, so it was really fixtures. That's really it. Their fixtures have been tough, even though they're still performing very well and keeping clean sheets. You just don't really know when the season starts. And I think I will continue to stay away from Chelsea assets until game week 7. Although for anybody who does have Chelsea assets, I don't think you should transfer them out, because if you have defenders, they're going to keep a clean sheet here and there up until game week 7, no matter who they play. You know what I mean? Same thing if you've already transferred Lukaku in. I still think he can score goals in the next 3 game weeks until game week 7. But personally, I want to see kind of Lukaku get some playing time with Mount, Havertz, Pulisic, Werner, and then hopefully by game week 7, he can start firing them away. So that's really what's kind of helped me from picking up Chelsea assets.
Yeah, I mean, Lukaku is such a solid option, and that Chelsea run starting game week 7 of teams that they're playing, it is pretty, it's like a solid 8 or 9 weeks of really, really good things to target. So if you're wildcarding now, you could really pick up a couple of those assets and maybe even transfer in one down the line as we get close to game week 7, and you'd probably do quite well, especially with even options like Rudiger. The way that Chelsea shut down that back line with only 10 men was just incredible this last weekend against a Liverpool who, just kept coming and coming over and over again. So I think it's really a solid pick. I mean, the danger though is the Tuchel roulette almost becoming as infamous as Pep roulette.
Yeah. No, and that's a tough one, because there's so many good players on that team, but you don't really know who's going to play. I think. Yeah, for the people who are wildcarding game week 4, I think Christensen, Azpilicueta, Rudiger, they've played 90 minutes in all 3 games so far. I can't see them getting rotated much. They're all 3 different price points. Aspi is 6 million, I think. Rudiger is 5.5, and Christensen is only 5 million. So I think, all of them are great options. I do think that Christensen has kind of picked up that starting spot over Thiago Silva. I think Thiago Silva will kind of feature in the Champions League games instead of the Premier League games. But yeah, the roulette that Tuchel is having, it's tough, especially the midfield, right? Because two midfielders are always going to be on the bench. It's either going to be Havertz, Mount, Werner, or Pulisic. You don't really know who's going to play. I do think the safest picks in that midfield are probably Havertz and Mount. But if you do go for them, you definitely want to make sure you have some bench players that are playing 90 minutes because you don't know that they're going to play every single game week. I think the only safe kind of pick offensively is Lukaku, right? I can't see him getting rotated unless he's, he needs fitness or something and needs to rest. That's the only reason I can see him getting rotated. So yeah, Michael, I guess with that, I have one last question for you. So since this channel is for FPL advice, what is one piece of advice you have for new and experienced FPL managers watching this right now?
The one thing I would say is to avoid taking transfer hits as much as possible. Avoid them. I mean, I lost 140 points in transfer hits last season because I was too eager to ride the wave of budget players who were outperforming, and I ended up costing myself, pretty severely. Even if they did perform pretty well, I'm still losing at least probably 60 to 80 points last season. I would say plan your transfers out for the next 3 weeks. That's the biggest reason I created this alternative FDR. If you want to make a transfer that goes outside of your plan and it's not because of a multi-week injury, ask yourself if that player you're bringing in for the hit will at least get an assist or a clean sheet in the next 2 weeks. You're talking about those 4 points here or there to make up for it because it's kind of even with those transfer hits. And whether the player you're replacing won't get those points, because that's the other consideration. If you're replacing someone who's still pretty solid, the player you're bringing in has to really outperform.
Yeah, no, especially when you're taking a hit, right? So it's a great piece of advice, and I really couldn't agree more. I too learned the hard way when it kind of came to taking hits. 2 seasons ago, my first season playing FPL with you, I took so many hits, and I know it hurt me significantly. So I'm a little bummed you didn't say the most important piece of advice is to subscribe to the FPL Advice channel, but that's all right. We'll get through it, Michael. So thank you so much for doing this. It has been such a pleasure discussing FPL, your team, my team, captaincy options, and of course, transfer ideas. If you did enjoy watching this, make sure you give a like and subscribe to the channel. If you're interested in space news, Michael is your guy. Make sure to follow him on Instagram and Twitter. I have linked his accounts on each slide, and we'll also include them in the description of the video. Once again, Michael, thank you and best of luck this season.
Thanks, Michael. I appreciate you having me on, and best of luck to you as well.